Good evening and welcome to the fourth in a series of virtual chats sponsored by the Nevada Department of Education through its Digital Learning Collaborative. The purpose of the collaborative is to provide information, resources, and support to Nevada's educators and families. Because of COVID-19, most learners are experiencing distance learning in some form or another. Today, we will hear from a few education leaders discussing the topic of our diverse learners. My name is Jordana. I am in my 21st year of education. I spent many years in elementary and middle school as a classroom teacher. I have been an instructional coach, and I'm currently a project facilitator with the ELL division in the Clark County School District. And I'm going to have each of my panelists introduce themselves, just give your name and a short bio and what is your role related to education. Let's start with Dr. Jena Salazar.
Hello, I'm Jena Salazar. I'm the assistant principal at Orr Middle School. This is also my 21st year in education. I was a gen ed teacher for 15 years and then SPED, and then I had a coaching opportunity that led to a special ed facilitator job and now an AP. I have done it all as a teacher, and I'm just excited to be here and offer some perspective.
Alicia.
Hi everyone, my name is Felicia Ortiz. I am a member of the State Board of Education. I've been on the board going on 5 years now. Originally appointed and then elected and recently re-elected for a second term. I am going to define a few terms that were already said because I know how people that come from the outside education might go, what was that? So ELL, English Language Learner Division, SPED is Special Education, Gen Ed is General Education. I am a pretty big stickler about making sure we use language that parents and families will understand. And so if we say anything throughout this discussion today that I feel like needs to be defined, I might pop in and define it. But I got into this role because education's kind of in my blood. My mommy's a teacher, or a retired teacher now. And what really drove me to run for the position was that I saw an awful lot of kids that looked like me and nobody sitting at the table that did. And so I really wanted to not only be their voice, but ask some of the questions that I wasn't hearing asked and really make sure that our kids were getting the education that they deserved. And so that's what led me to apply for the position and then run for it. And equity is my jam. That's the hill I will die on. So that's my main focus, was as a member of the board. And for those of you that are not aware, the State Board of Education is primarily responsible for policy and regulations around K-12 public education. So we license private schools, but we don't oversee them in any way. We do oversee all K-12 public schools and hold them accountable for delivering quality education to our kids.
And I will expand on that for a second because you explained it to me very well once, that you guys say the what and then each district gets to do the how of how it's done, correct?
Exactly.
You're a good teacher. That's exactly what I've learned. Averill, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Ariel Kelly. I am a doctoral student at the University of Las Vegas. So I am spending a lot of time doing a lot of reading around equity and civic ed. I worked in Clark County School District for 11 years, working at Rancho. And then I went to Mojave when I went turnaround, and that was like the greatest experience. I was able to be student council advisor and just really get connected. And then went to Valley. And then my last gig was at West Prep, not at the university, teaching full-time undergrads who are pre-service teachers, the diversity course in education, as well as I'm a graduate assistant in the Zeder Center for Literacy. So we're looking at how to improve literacy and the collaboration between social studies and English. So I am slowly defining my research topic every day. I do have a theoretical framework, which is great, but the real topic I'm looking at, we'll see. If you're interested, I'm looking at critical race theory, but I think I'm gonna go through the lens of praxis instead of looking at it through counter narrative or something like that. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But that's what I do.
Fantastic. And Juliana.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you tonight. My name is Juliana Urtubey. I am a special education teacher. I was just named 2021 Nevada Teacher of the Year. So I'm really, really proud to represent our state, represent the Latinx community. We make up 1/3 of the state, which makes Nevada feel even more like home to a lot of us. I have been teaching special education for a very long time, about 10 years. I started off as a bilingual special educator in Arizona, and then I've been living here with my family for about 7 years. I worked at Crestwood Elementary for about 7 years in downtown Las Vegas, and right now I'm a hybrid teacher. Part of the day I'm co-teaching in the special education pre-K program, the autism program, and the resource programs. And then the other part of the day I'm doing what we call instructional strategy work. So basically I'm just supporting teachers in everything they need in terms of making their instruction rigorous and building relationships with children and families. And then the part that I'm enjoying the most about my job this year is I get to work with families to help them navigate the technology and all of the different pathways to learn this year. And so I've gotten to work really closely with families. So when this opportunity came up to speak directly to families, I was super excited about it because I just have a lot of gratitude for all the families and how hard they're working and how they're juggling so much to be present and to be so supportive for students. And I really appreciate the opportunity that teachers and families have to kind of get to know each other a little bit better. I know that they're really difficult times. It's not easy for absolutely anybody, but I appreciate the ability to make a virtual community in the meantime until we can get back into our schools.
I love that. And speaking as somebody who's got children at home who are going to school, and then because my meetings are all virtual like this, I watch my friends juggle having their kids, having their spouses teaching, they've got kids there, and we're always really good, I think, about congratulating teachers for stepping up because we know that teachers always do, but more than ever we see this year that families are having to step up and really be such an integral part of their child's day-to-day education in a way that we've never really experienced before. And I'll agree with you, Juliana, there's so much more community building going on, and we have such a great opportunity for more community building and getting so much closer with our families that even though this is such a difficult time, that hopefully will be one outcome is this long-standing close relationship that educators and the education system has with our families. So I'm always looking for the light at the end of the tunnel with being during these COVID times. So my first question, and you guys can just kind of jump in, at your will. We'll start off with something really positive. In distance learning, what has been successful? So either in the 100% distance learning or in the hybrid learning. And I know, Averill, you're at college level, but my niece is at college, and so she's being affected as well. So it really just goes, to kindergarten all the way through, or pre-K all the way through. What has really worked, especially when you think of our diverse learners?
So for me, I think it's forcing an opportunity for students to learn tenacity, learn those skills that require them to overcome hardships, to figure things out, to think outside the box, to overcome struggles or obstacles that come their way with technology or their home environment or whatever the case may be, and allow them to have the, I guess, buy-in and engagement in their own education, because there's not that same accountability, I guess you could say. When they're at home, they don't have to log in necessarily. Some of them, a lot of our students are home alone. So there's not a parent there who's helping them log in. And so they have to have that stick-to-itiveness, I guess, to be able to say, hey, this is important to me and I'm going to get out there. So for me, especially when I look at my special ed population, some of those skills, that learned helplessness that's prevalent oftentimes in special ed classrooms, I feel it's an opportunity that, although wasn't foreseen, we didn't expect it, But if you look at the silver lining, for me, I see kids doing things that, and being independent and doing things that they couldn't do before. Technology was in their classrooms, but now they are forced to integrate in ways that maybe they could just hide behind or not engage or just choose not to or fight the system. But right now they have no choice. And for me, I think it's exciting. And I think it's an opportunity that we're teaching skills that are on their IEPs with behavior and social skills, as well as study skills that maybe I feel like we're maybe teaching them better in this forum than in some ways in the classroom.
I'm a teacher, so I have excellent wait time. I will wait to see if anybody else wants to pop in.
I'm happy to share. I think that there are a lot of things that are working well. There are some students who, have learning and thinking differences who really are doing well under the schedule, the flexibility. They're able to determine their own attention span and get work done on their own time. They're able to not have to do a lot of the things that are difficult for some kids with learning disabilities or any kind of disability. And we see a group of students who are doing really well with virtual. And then you have another group of students who, it's kind of in this transitional phase because it is really hard. And as schools learn more, we are changing and adjusting to make sure that we're responding to kids' needs. And then you have a set group of students who are struggling a lot. They miss the social interaction of seeing their teachers every day, seeing their peers every day, and that is hard. And so we're trying to figure out good solutions to be able to work with them to fill in those social needs. And we're just doing the best that we can. I think that if we say what's going well is that teachers, families, and students are doing the best that we can. I think we have to celebrate the fact that our state partnered with philanthropists and organizations to be able to provide one-to-one devices and the Wi-Fi hotspots. I think Connecting Kids Nevada is one of the biggest successes I've seen recently in public education. I speak to teachers from other states and, I haven't heard of anything quite like that. And so it's really empowering as a teacher to know, okay, this family's struggling to get their kid to have quality internet. I can give them a phone number to call, and that phone number has kind people on the other side, and then it's so efficient. And so I think that that's another thing that we need to celebrate. I think our superintendent has done an amazing job of communicating the goals that she has for our state and being understanding of the humanistic issues that everybody has right now, but then also continuing these high expectations that we have for our children's success.
So I think I can answer this question both as a student and then as somebody who's teaching teachers. So like as a student, I have to say this is probably one of the more stressful semesters because I'm juggling just, the workload, and it does feel like an excessive workload. But I have to say, like, professors have been nice to not meet as often or to cut off the schedule a little bit so it's not as much pressure being put on us. But I actually asked the same question to my students. And they undergrads said that they feel like university faculty is assigning more work than normal. And they feel like they're swimming or trying to, just struggle to stay caught up. So a lot of the times, at least in my course, and then when I meet with students on the outside, I'm always just checking out like their mental health and how they're doing and seeing if they need anything. The great thing about the university system also is that UNLV has grants students can apply for. They have ways for students to get Wi-Fi. There are ways for them to get devices on campus to be successful. They've even opened up different parts of the campus so students can't be at home, they can be on campus to do that. And then I think for me, it's just being extremely flexible. Like this is just a semester, just flexibility.
I'll add a little bit from the outside perspective. So from the State Board of Ed perspective, I think the silver lining is one, we've proven what a flexible system we could possibly be. And a lot of people for many years have said the education system is not flexible and we can't change and we can't do things differently. We've proven that's possible. what I see as a positive is for the children that have the privilege of having a really good supportive home situation, there is a whole lot more involvement from the parents and a lot more transparency into how their kids are being educated, and that's good and bad. It's good because they're being more proactive, they're really involved, they're working, but it's also, and I think it's a good thing, but maybe not everyone does, it's also revealing very quickly where we have ineffective educators, or where educators aren't willing to go the extra mile and do the extra work that it takes to teach in this format. And vice versa, right? We're getting very clear on which students don't have a supportive family network or a situation at home and aren't getting the support that they need. But overall, the response is mixed. There's families that love it. My godkids are thriving. They're doing great. Their grades have actually gone up. But I have other friends and kids that I've talked to in the neighborhood that hate it and they're not doing well. And I hear some not so great stories of children that are really suffering socially and emotionally. So it's a mixed bag, but I really do think that it has opened the door for us to be more flexible and more innovative and really look at potential long-term hybrid models of delivering education so that we're not stuck to this 1940s, 50s model of put the kids in a classroom, put them in a grade based on how old they are and teach them the same thing all day long.
Yeah,
Not for us anymore.
Couldn't agree with you more. Amen to all of that.
I agree. I think if we go back to how we did school before the pandemic, we have missed a complete opportunity to change education. And I hope that we don't. I think that people are going to fight for that and want that. And I mean, what a missed opportunity if we do. As an administrator, I feel like, yes, growing pains everywhere. It's a lot. It's a lot for teachers. It's a lot for administrators to help, to be those instructional support. It is a lot. And I don't pretend that it's not. I don't tell my teachers, oh, it's no problem. I have empathy for them, but I think the opportunity for growth for educators and for students and for just the school system in general is there. And if we just sort of survive this time and go right back to where we were, I mean, shame on us is what I think.
Amen.
And I just want to echo that. Like, I thought this, like, I was super excited, right, that we would reimagine schools right now. Like, schools would be totally different, right? The school day would go, like, kids would be meeting randomly times throughout the day or whatever. And then as I was listening to my teacher friends, realizing how much pushback schools were getting from whether it was the district office or even in their own buildings, how much their administrators weren't willing to change and try to catch up and try to be innovative and interactive. That really kind of bothered me a little bit. But in my course in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to talk about cultural relevancy and cultural relevant pedagogies. And now you're making me think of how do we talk about cultural relevant pedagogy in the virtual setting?
Absolutely.
And so.
Absolutely. And, I don't know if this is kind of going off track, but I was, I had conversations with my teachers as we went back to school and reminded them that they are guests in these people's homes. They are seeing things and having front row seats in homes that they would not normally see. So,
and they weren't invited to.
They weren't invited.
Our teachers are uninvited guests.
Right. We are uninvited guests in their homes. So my cleaning levels are not the same as my students' level of cleanliness that I see in the background if I'm a teacher. My, what I am doing during the day might look differently. So I feel like teachers need to remember that it's their job to educate. And I feel like sometimes that cultural understanding and cultural acceptance is just lost because they only have their own perspective. They're looking at the world with through their own lens. And again, opportunities are being lost to parlay where these kids come from into lessons, and how can we utilize their culture in the lesson versus it being viewed as an obstacle. And I'm hearing teachers talk about, I just finished my first round of observations this week, well, I can't control, the noise in the background, let's say. Who cares? Like, what does it matter if there's noise in the background? We have to learn to teach kids, and it doesn't matter if there's noise in the background. I mean, ask them what the noise is, talk to them, have a discussion, build relationships with these kids, figure out how you can be a part of the family and not an obstacle or awkward about it because you're in their home. They didn't ask you to be there. So I just think that we've got to change the way that we view our role. And if we truly want to be facilitators of education and facilitators of knowledge, or imparting our great wisdom onto these students, which is ridiculous, right? So we've got to change the way we view our role.
I think you had a point about deficits and how, so I was hearing that there were some teachers who are like, I want kids to be sitting upright. I don't want them in their bed and stuff like that. Like, that doesn't matter. So here's my question to you. Sorry, Jordana. How did you train your teachers to help train students?
Okay, you mean as far as like what the expectations were for schooling? Like what?
Yeah.
First of all, we're not allowed to require them to have their cameras on. So we cannot make kids turn on their cameras. But what we can do is build relationship with kids where they want to turn on their cameras. Help kids understand that we are there for them. It's not a I have rules and you've got to do this because I'm the teacher kind of thing. It's like, hey, we're going to build a relationship so that let's have a talk. Let's talk. And would you talk with me with a blank screen? So I can go into classrooms in which their kids are on camera, kids are engaging, they're typing in the chat box, they're unmuting themselves and asking questions, they're in Pear Deck or Go Guardian typing. To me, I can tell that relationships and routine and structure has been established in those classrooms. So for me, when I talk about how do I teach my teachers or how do I support them in that, is talking about those things, that students need to feel comfortable with you. You need to take time to build relationships and not just have this arbitrary, where I'm the teacher, turn on your camera, because it's, the students are like, no, I'm not. And I can tell the difference the second I walk in there, what kind of relationship building and routine has been established in those classrooms within a couple of minutes.
I think it's also important to think about distance education in terms of the logistical things that families are trying to organize. So if any family is sharing one Wi-Fi connection, it's really hard for people to have their cameras on. That's what we're learning, that it's really challenging. So I think that we also have to celebrate how siblings are helping each other. We had parent-teacher conferences this week, and the families were just we're asking them, how are things with you and your family? How is it going? What's working well? What's something that we can support you with? And a lot of it was that flexibility that Averill's talking about, because one of the families mentioned, one of our high school students has this particular class in the morning, and so everybody has their camera off so that he can have his camera on during this class. And so I think that it's really important for families to know that our schools are really trying hard to understand this new dynamic, and I think that it's really important for teachers to look at how they view the world and their asset mindset, and seeing the strengths in family versus seeing, whatever bias or whatever incongruency to their own personal identities. And I think that this is work that has to happen across the nation in people's personal lives and in the professional lives. Unfortunately, bias doesn't divide itself between contract hours and your personal hours. And so families will know when, I think that I think, and I hope this is fair to say, that families know when teachers think less of them. And so I think that families, this is a conversation for families. So I want to center it on families. And I think that our families that are multilingual keep speaking the many languages that you speak at home. Our families that have, 2 or 3 families living in one place, we don't, an educator who's working with you won't mind the noise. We understand that there are lots of things going on, and we're grateful for your participation. So I think that it's really important for us, especially people of color, to feel empowered by our reality instead of trying to hide it because we feel abnormal. And so I think it's really important for educators to know that there is no normal of anything. There is no normal language to speak. There is no normal family configuration, any of that. Now, are there inequities? Absolutely. And so there's inequities that we all have to work together to address actively, daily. And so for families, my take home is that you are wonderful. Like I hope that distance education hasn't made any family feel like they need to change. Now, there are supports and things we can put in place so that learning occurs more readily in the home. Absolutely. I mean, the solution of having a wall behind you is great, especially for the little kids, so they don't get distracted by whatever's happening in the back. That's terrific, and so there are suggestions and things that we can do to facilitate it and make it easier. But that has been my favorite part about virtual education, is this proximity in terms of relationship building and in terms of just understanding each other.
Agreed.
So I love all this conversation, and I'm just going to swing it back to a question, because I think one of the questions I have really relates to all this, and I would really like to dive deeper into this. Just this conversation regarding families having to open their doors to us and how that makes them feel, how teachers need to make that shift. But really, as Juliana was saying, how this really brings to light the inequities that we knew were there, but now they are really just stark in our faces, and we really quickly had to face it and address it. And I'll agree that we did a pretty good job, especially with making sure our families have devices and Wi-Fi, but there's so much more that needs to be done. So we definitely can agree that there has been a spotlight placed on students that have been marginalized in the education system. So given what we now know, what can and what should we expect going forward in education to reduce these inequities? Where should we go from here beyond just giving students devices, giving families hotspots? Really, what work can be done now to reduce the inequities that are going to persist after COVID is over and we're back at school?
I'll take that one. So from the state's perspective, we're pushing, and this is several of us at the state level, are pushing to encourage, because we don't have any authority to actually do this, to encourage our state to recognize internet access as like a public utility, right? So everybody should have electricity and water and a telephone line running to their home. Same thing should go for internet, right? We should all have, every person in the state should have access to high quality, high speed internet, because anymore it's a necessity for day-to-day life. So that's one thing. The other thing is that from the state level, we're really looking at how we educate a little differently. So coming from more of a competency-based learning model. I love that, Jena. So yeah, it's so for most of us, it seems so common sense, right? So I don't have children of my own. I just have 490,000 of yours. And so I think about my godkids, right? And so when my goddaughter was in 2nd grade, she was reading at a 5th grade level, but maybe she was doing math at a 1st grade level, and she was doing, I don't know all of the scores, but at that time in her life, I wanted them to push her to continue to excel in reading and then give her the support she needed in math, right? And I hate this concept of us moving kids from grade to grade just because of the age they're in, or expecting them to be at a certain level of whatever, right? Because of the age they're in. And this switch to digital learning has also given us the opportunity to pursue that a little further. So that's another thing we're contemplating and trying to figure out the best way to start moving towards that. There's a couple of districts in the state that have already been doing that, and it's going well. They've slowed it down a bit during this. They've slowed down the implementation a bit because of COVID, but they're in year 1 or 2, anticipating like a 7-year rollout of moving to that model. So interesting stuff. The other thing that I think is a big deal that we all need to be focused on is just how obvious it is that our school districts are underfunded. So one of the main reasons that we're digital is there's not enough space, there's not enough buses, there's not enough teachers, there's not enough supplies, there's not enough portables in the state of Nevada for us to potentially even add space, for us to go to a model where we had manageable class sizes. Now, think about that for a second. Manageable class sizes in the age of COVID, right? So that there's enough space to spread kids out, is like 15 to 18 kids per classroom. I think if you asked most parents what would be the class size they would like their kids to be in, that would be it, right? So we would literally have to double our workforce and potentially triple the number of schools that we have in order to get to that. That's a lot of money. One of the other major areas that we're short right now is social workers, school psychologists, all of those folks that could be supporting not only our kids, but our teachers through all of this as well. I had the Department of Ed recently asked us, the state board, to approve ratios. So the number of students that each of these positions should have. Like a school psychologist, don't quote me on this, was like 500 to 1. A social worker, 250 students to each social worker. That kind of, those are the ratios I'm talking about. And I said, we were able to set those aspirational goals, but we couldn't force it because obviously we don't have the money to hire that many people. The cost to actually get to those ratios, which still seems rather high, right? 1 psychologist to 500 kids, that's a lot, that's a huge caseload. The cost just to get us to the ratios that we're talking about was $264 million. So for a little bit of comparison, because everybody loves to bring this topic up, the amount of money that we're getting from the marijuana tax is about $75 million a year. That would not even cover hiring social workers and psychologists, not to mention teachers. And so I think it is imperative for all of us, families, community members, education advocates, for all of us to promote and advocate for more funding for education, because that will help us to overcome some of the inequities we're seeing today. Now I'll get off the soapbox now.
In case anybody forgot what the question was, it was how can we address the inequities in education moving forward?
So in a nutshell, money. More a different way of teaching, right? And I forgot the first one already.
More social workers and psychologists.
Yes.
Or personnel, yeah.
More personnel, more people, more adults to support our kids.
But is the money aspect even really being taken serious? Like, are our legislators really even acknowledging that and listening to that? I mean, we could all sit around and talk to each other about this, and of course we're going to agree, you know, we're all in this for kids, but are the people and the powers that be, do they understand? I don't know. I'm asking, do they understand what is needed, and do we have any inclination that they're going to move in that direction?
Do you want?
I will say they do understand. They absolutely know. The question is, in any given session that happens every other year for 4 months, is there the political will? Because the only way we get money is by raising taxes. And so it just depends on what's going on and if there's the will to want to raise taxes. Every 2 years we wonder and we hope.
So I will give you my personal perspective. I seriously thought in the last session that that was going to happen. I thought we had all the pieces, all the stars that aligned finally, so that could happen. We had a governor that ran on it, said, well, I'm going to help education. I'm going to do everything I can for education. So many of our legislators did. I thought it was a shoo-in, right? And so I went up there at the beginning of session on my own time and dime, just because this is something I'm so passionate about, to talk to each and every one of the legislators and make sure, to your point, Jena, that they understood the need for moving to a new funding formula. That's the way we distribute money from the state down to the schools, school districts, so maybe clear on that, and how much money needed to be in that pot in order to adequately, and I say adequate because that was the number I was using, not aspirational goal, just adequately fund education. By the time I finished talking, I literally booked meetings with every single legislator that was on education committees and met with most of them in that first day. By the time I walked out of the legislature that afternoon and went back to my hotel room, I cried myself to sleep. It was clear that it was not going to go anywhere. And it was super depressing.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on inequities? Although I think Felicia has definitely covered a lot of it. All right, I will move on then. I'll shift a bit to something much different. So thinking about our students, I'm thinking that this chat is really geared towards families. Thinking about the content that we provide to our students, how do you guys feel our students are able to see themselves and their families in Nevada's curriculum?
Well, first of all, we don't have the same curriculum statewide. Like, you know, every school does their own thing. So I don't know how that really, that's new for me. I have worked in, oh gosh, I don't know, 6 districts, 4 states. I think that's it. 6 districts, 4 states. And I've never, now granted, I've never worked for a district that was as large, so that's different, but I've never worked in a district in which every school chose their own curriculum practically, right? That's very new for me. So part, I think, of why CCSD struggles in some ways is because we're not comparing apples to apples. Everybody has sort of their own thing going on. We have some common assessments, we have some common curriculum or programs that are, you know, you see, but it's not across the whole district. So I'm not sure how to answer that question as far as the whole district is concerned.
Let me ask it a different way. What do you think teachers could do to help students then? So thinking of our diverse learners, so thinking of our special ed students, thinking about our English language learners, thinking about our students of color, thinking about students that have other types of physical impairments like a hearing impairment or a visual impairment. How can our diverse students feel more included? Looking at the content that's presented to them, what can teachers do to help those students feel like they are represented in the content that is being delivered to them?
Okay, I'm going to say it. Implement the multicultural standards. They're right there in the curriculum. I've been trying my hardest, I was going to say it, but they're right there. There's the only group of standards, K-12, where there's 3 groups of standards for every kid, right? And it's in social studies, which is, I think, is kind of interesting, right? Because I don't know how many elementary students get social studies, because I think if you're looking at a study from a couple studies I was reading from in 98, 99, I think students got from K to 6th grade, it was like 3 hours. And it's probably been reduced down all the way down to probably like an hour. I don't know, I'm just trying to say it. So I think we need to do a better job of teaching teachers how to be more culturally competent and to be more inclusive within their curriculum choices, their content. This is kind of like my baby. This is something that drives me absolutely crazy. I'm not saying I was a stellar person at it. I was struggling to do it too, because there's not a lot of content, there's not a lot of resources. But who's creating that content? Who's creating that resource? Who's creating that knowledge? Higher ed. Are there people of color that exist in higher ed that can actually do it? We only make up 1% of the professors not there, but the knowledge is not being created. So I think my biggest advice is teachers need to be informed on how to implement and how to teach the multicultural standards. Because if you look at the way they're written, it is meant to have inclusivity.
Can I make it? Okay, so Averill, amen to everything you said. We literally just had a presentation on the multicultural standards in our diversity, equity, and inclusion work group under the State Board of Ed. We're pushing it. We're working on it. They're actually working on creating a resource list for teachers. But here's the thing. We're doing this for families. Families are hopefully listening. We need your help, because I have a feeling some of what you're teaching your kids at home is probably more culturally relevant than what we're teaching at school. And to Juliana's point earlier, this digital learning atmosphere that we're in right now, or this model that we're in, gives us a perfect opportunity to partner with families and communities. And to Jena's earlier point, take things that they're seeing in the home, in many cases that's culture, right?
Yes.
And incorporate it in your lessons, right? If your kids are constant, like I was one of the kids that brought tortillas to lunch every day, right? If you're teaching a science class, have the mom teach them how to make tortillas and use measuring cups and multiply the recipe so that they learn how to multiply fractions, right? Like there are so many ways that you can incorporate culturally relevant stuff into your lessons every day. And I'm not even a teacher, but my mom was awesome at doing this. And so I think that there's a ton of ways, Averill, to your point, it doesn't exist, frankly.
Yeah.
Majority of the curriculum providers that produce curriculum for our schools are just now getting to the point where they're actually thinking about cultural relevancy and bias testing their curriculum. We have to do it ourselves. We have to, and I think a big piece of that is teachers being willing to be open and vulnerable and look themselves in the mirror and address their own implicit bias, right? So that they can move past that and understand how much beautiful contributions there are from the diversity of our students. I mean, nowhere else, I don't think anywhere else in the world could you find a school district where 72 languages are spoken, you know, and where we have such a rich tapestry of diversity. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to work with families to develop opportunities to work that into our curriculum.
And I'll even take that a step further and take that back to Jena's point way at the beginning of this conversation. That's the best way to build community. You are telling kids, I see you, when you say, hey, you're eating tortillas. Did you make those yourself? And now you're acknowledging their kid, you're admiring their culture, and you are asking them to bring it out to everybody because you're valuing it. And what a great way to build community, which, to Jena's point earlier, that's the core of everything. Nothing else in education will ever move forward if you haven't taken the time to build a community and let your students know that they are seen and loved and valued. And so what a great wraparound for all of that, to supporting, educating students through building community, recognizing their culture, showing them value, and then we can really take them forward with calculus and physics and all that other fun stuff that we're trying to do.
Right.
Anybody have any final things they've been just dying to say and haven't piped in with yet?
I have a few things. So, you know, I think we have to take it a step further than just cultural relevancy. It's cultural respect, cultural responsibility, culturally responsible education, right? I think that there's been some celebrations in that a lot of the students who may have not felt as comfortable speaking their home language, being home this much has allowed them to increase their skills in that language. And I think that that's that's incredible. I think that's really important. And there's important skills that are being learned from kids being home. Now, I say this with, a grain of salt, because I know that they're the same population of our students who struggle to make growth and access because of the difficult things that they encountered in their life are still going to have that, and it's compounded. And so we talked a little bit earlier about like, what do we wish would happen? Well, the students who had absence issues and attendance issues before COVID, they're still there present. Those issues are still present. We need to design something different for those students who, even with one-to-one, even with one-to-one devices, that means that every child has their own device, Wi-Fi, they're still not able to attend. Maybe it's like what Dr. Salazar said, which is, there's nobody there at the house who can be there to guide them. We need to tailor our instruction to who our students are and what their needs are. So I wish we had, as a bilingual educator, we studied the farming migrant education system, where it was a digital education system, and this has been going on since like the 70s. And no matter what state the family went to, the education was happening. So before, in the 70s, it was like mail-in packets, and there was like tutors and things like that. We need something like that right now for the students we can't reach, because teachers are trying really, really hard, and we can't reach that set of kids. But that's an example of what this means. People think, and it is first about like knowing your students. We know their identities, and it's not, identities isn't a singular thing. We have every person has multiple identities, and they intersect at all times. So we, as teachers, we need to know those identities of our students. We also need to know their needs. What are the needs of the students and the families? And then design our instruction based on those needs. So, a lot of people think that being culturally relevant is teaching about Frida Kahlo or,
Black History Month.
Well, teaching Black History Month is culturally relevant, I think those things are definitely very important. And it's not to belittle those examples, because those examples are beautiful places. But I think it's knowing who your students are as people, knowing how their worlds relate. If we look at our communities, we want our educators to be part of the communities they teach, not just kind of like a vacuum where they go there and then they leave. How are they connected to the community? And so I think COVID exposed that if we didn't have those connections before, how it's going to be even more difficult to build them virtually. Can we build them? Absolutely. And I think that families are paving the way for us to do this, because families, when they're able to, they're providing us with so much information. And I really hope moving forward that we continue to have that level of proximity with families so that we can continue to learn about the students. But, so at the end of the day, it's a matter of, do we really know our students? Another tool that I like to use, because, we can sit around and wait for culturally responsive standards to be adopted by the state or by our district or by our school. But there's a lot of resources out there available. One of my favorites is the Teaching Tolerance Social Justice Standards. And I think if a family wanted to support their child in terms of their understanding of equity and inclusion and diversity, and support their children in developing and fostering positive identities, that's where you would go. I think it's a 12-page PDF, and it tells you by grade level exactly what kids should be able to do. Like in kindergarten, kids should be able to name their multiple identities and feel happy about their identities. So these are things that we don't need to wait to have a training or anything like that. We just need to be introspective and really see our students, like you said, really see them. But I think the time is now for that. In terms of how students see themselves in their curriculum, well, it depends on the teacher. How does the teacher see them? So
I have a few final thoughts. In talking about, I said Black History Month, I think that sometimes we go an inch deep when it comes to cultural relevance and understanding. And we oftentimes, I feel, in education as a whole, we do things like Black History Month in a checkbox kind of manner, that we have met that standard, we have done that to include a certain population of students, and I feel that that isn't enough. It's not enough in 2020. And I feel like we need to take those things a step further to help students of color feel important every day and not just in February. So that's why I mentioned Black History Month. Second, talking about, for too long, I think there has been a adversarial relationship between families in the school system, and instead of being a partnership. And I think that that needs to be addressed. I feel that families and parents feel like the school thinks that they're, you know, not doing a good job. And I think that the school thinks that parents aren't doing a good job, and it goes back and forth. And I think everybody, as Juliana had said, is doing their best. I think parents send us their best, and we're doing our best to educate them. But if we have a partnership between the two institutions, I think we'll find ourselves a lot more successful versus an us against them kind of relationship that I feel is in education right now, and that needs to be addressed. Next, I feel like I completely agree that that identity aspect for students is important. Kids need to see their own identity, and I also think teachers should be a little bit more open in sharing who they are as human beings as well. That it doesn't, I don't have to have this facade that I'm your teacher and that you don't need to know anything about me personally. Of course, we can be appropriate in that, but I think teachers should be open to their students, and it should be a free and safe and healthy environment for everybody to be who they are. And I think we missed the boat in that too. And so I think that that's important. And finally, I think it is also a misstep in education that oftentimes we assume what families' needs are instead of asking them. And I think that we need to work on that as well. I can make assumptions based on data. I can make educated decisions based on data. I can talk to isolated parents. We can send surveys until we're blue in the face, because we do that a lot in education. But do we have relationships within the community and within the school system so that I can just say, what is it that you need and how can we help you achieve that or get that, or you know, whatever the case may be. But there is such a divide, I think, between families and the community and the education system that until we start bridging that gap and start having partnerships and relationships, and that they view us as we're on your side and you're on our side, and together our goals are to educate these kids, I think it's going to be difficult.
Amen. Anybody else? You all had a lot to say tonight. Then I would just like to thank you guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate not only taking the time, but having one more virtual meeting today. I'm sure this was not your first. Hopefully it was your last of the day, but we all have that Zoom fatigue, I think, at some point going on, especially on a Thursday. So thank you so much. And for people who are listening, if you're looking for more resources, both from the teacher end and from the family end, please visit nbdigitallearning.org, where we have housed more lots of resources. Usually once a month we kind of do a dump of resources, so please check back frequently. And thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next month.